Episode 2 of Dungeon Meshi just came out, and I have mixed feelings. So let's break it down and see what worked well and what didn't. This episode was directed and storyboarded by Takumi Ichikawa. We open on Marcille as a child in what turns out to be the nightmare that the narrator told us she had at the end of episode 1. The first thing that struck me here was the hand-drawn distortion in her mother's face caused by the imperfections in the glass window in front of her. It's a realistic feature of a medieval-style house, but more importantly, the contorted face also adds a sense of uneasiness and foreboding, which foreshadows the reveal a few seconds later that this is Marcille's nightmare about
dungeon food.
She gives a classic lecture on balanced nutrition and explains that they'll need to find eggs for a good source of fat. Almost half of this conversation is just laid over this still image of the four of them standing on this bridge, which lasts a full 12 seconds. The background image is beautifully painted, of course, but this is honestly not a great start to the episode. Anime in general is no stranger to still images during dialogue scenes disguised with clever tricks, but 12 is a lot of seconds, and there aren't even any clever tricks here. I mean, even a subtle parallax effect and some subtle rustling in the leaves could make this shot a lot more interesting. This seems like a pretty big oversight. Laios gives an info dump about his special interest, and they find a basilisk nest to steal eggs from. This shot gets the point across, but is again very rudimentary, particularly when compared to the same panel from the manga. I would love to see how the party traverses this underground forest and feel more connected with the landscape. Plus, who can resist a little bit of Marcille struggling to climb down onto this log in the background? It definitely feels like they're trying to save money right now. We can only hope it's for a good reason. The Basilisk shows up, chasing these two from earlier, and they rearranged this scene a little bit so that Marcille is now more involved, and she's the one Laios and Senshi have to rescue, instead of just these losers. This added shot of her frantically trying to evade the Basilisk is made much funnier by the fact that we're viewing it in long shot from afar, and Laios goes into rabid mode with this intimidation dance. This is another panel that I was looking forward to being animated, and I think they did a fairly good job with it. With key animation by Tetsuya Hasegawa, thank you Studio Trigger official Twitter account for these production materials, #DeliciousInDanjin. These scratchy lines around Laios' eyes make him look extra deranged, and I love the way his whole body vibrates. I'm not sure what's particularly intimidating about this little YMCA position he does, but he's in the zone. No judgment. The parallax effect here as the two menacingly dance at each other is a little weird. It's supposed to look like the camera is rotating to the right behind Laios' back while panning to the left, but because Laios and the Basilisk both stay in the same spot in the frame instead of sliding closer together and overlapping, it just ends up looking like the two of them are randomly sliding to the left through this whole shot. But it looks like the animators are back in their element when Laios and Senshi team up, and I love this shot where the camera travels through the reflections in Laios and the Basilisk's eyes. And this action shot, just like the ones from the first scene of episode 1, takes the original art, lowers the camera down to the level of the floor to get a cool low-angle shot, and uses some exaggerated foreshortening in Laios' foot and scabbard to make this pose look way more dynamic. They pluck and prepare the Basilisk, and in this shot, the compositors have added a goosebumpy texture and a little bit of rosy blush to make this thing look uncomfortably realistic. And Senshi roasts it up with some medicinal herbs while this guy is actively dying from poison in the background. I think the pacing feels a little bit rushed here. It's understandable to move quickly because this story is a little bit of a slow burn, but the whole point of this scene is that even though Senshi has the antidote to the poison, this guy is slowly dying while they wait for Senshi, who seems to only care about making the dish as delicious as possible, takes his time going methodically through each step to create a beautiful dish. We do get some Marcille struggling to climb after all as they head deeper into the dungeon and decide to harvest some mandrakes. Powered by pure insecurity, Marcille goes off on her own to harvest them in the way her textbooks taught her, and I love the framing in this shot where the giant bat she catches flies right up to the camera, and we can see the exact moment when the mandrake screams make it go insane, and the pupils disappear from its eyes. It quickly turns and plummets back down, but the mandrake trailing behind it still has its upward momentum, so it then flies right up into close-up range too, before being yanked back down by the bat. In this shot, the animators use frame spacing to show how erratically the bat is flying. He does this sort of looping pattern, but the distance between each frame varies wildly. He'll fall sharply in one frame and then go back up with the big flap of his wings, then float in the air with almost no movement at all for 3 or 4 frames before suddenly plummeting again. If you were to imagine an acrobatic plane doing graceful loops while dragging a flag behind it, the flag would probably trail a bit behind but follow the exact same path that the plane takes. Here, the mandrake starts out doing that, but as the the bat moves and fits and starts, it leaves some slack in the rope, and the Mandrake, no longer being pulled along by it, follows its own momentum and swings outward, deviating from the bat's trajectory, and ends up in this unstable orbit around it, before getting yanked sharply upward again. And for a little added bit of instability, this cut alternates seemingly randomly between being animated on 2s and 3s. Senshi whips up some Mandrake and Basilisk egg omelettes, and these vegetable chopping shots are so simple but never cease to be satisfying. Honestly, I think the sound design does just as much work as the animation. This bit of the chopped Mandrake frying is animated on 2s, but there's a little bit of wobble in between each frame. You can tell this was done in post after the animation was finished, because it also affects Senshi's chopsticks in the area where they touch the Mandrake bits. It actually looks a lot like the turbulent displace effect that I use to make my lines wobble as I draw them. It's a very subtle effect, but it gives the subconscious feeling that this stuff is in constant motion. Chilchuck finally gets his moment in the sun and uses his expertise to find a secret passage and disarm the traps to allow the gang to descend faster. And we get our first impact frames of the series when Senshi carelessly sets off this flamethrower trap. For 3 frames, the screen goes completely white and the line work turns dark and sketchy and gets smeared outward from the point of the explosion. I find it very funny that Senshi's expression stays exactly the same even as the frame itself is getting obliterated by the fire. Then this low angle shot is reminiscent of that other one from earlier, but unlike the action poses from the Basilisk fight, this time Senshi is hilariously just standing stock still like an NPC while he thinks about using the oil for cooking. Chilchuck is forced to use the traps from this room to help Senshi cut up the meat from the giant bat, and there's some great character acting here where his jerky back and forth movements show that he's struggling with the weight of it. And in this cut, where he jumps up and stomps down to set off the blade trap, he hangs in the air for about 4 frames before falling back down. This defies physics a bit, but it gives the sense that he's really trying to come down with all his force to set off the trap. Being much lighter than everyone else, he's uniquely suited to avoid traps, so to set one off intentionally is not only against his very nature, but it also takes a lot of force. This is a really cool smash cut by episode director Takumi Ichikawa. Chilchuck's serious, detail-oriented anxiety has been clashing with Senshi's laid-back attitude, so cutting straight from the axe to Senshi's knife passes time seamlessly and also draws a nice parallel between the two characters who have been at odds for this whole sequence. Senshi isn't done frustrating Chilchuck just yet, but this cut does symbolize that there's at least a little bit of camaraderie forming between the two of them. Chilchuck tries his hand at frying the tempura with another fire trap, and there's another impact frame when he sets it off to try to increase the heat of the pot, but this time there's more emphasis on the light being projected onto Chilchuck on the other side of the room, so rather than completely blowing out the entire frame, everything actually goes black instead of white, except for the fire and the parts of Chilchuck that are illuminated by it. And unlike Senshi, who was unfazed by it, Chilchuck is definitely phased. The final shot of the tempura is a delightfully detailed still image, and it seems like that first glamour shot of the hot pot was an outlier just because it was boiling in water, and all the others will be simple still images going forward. Finally, we get some ending credits, this time accompanied by original illustrations by manga artist Ryoko Kui. Overall, I had mixed feelings about this episode. It wasn't bad by any means, but it definitely felt a little bit cheap, particularly near the start. I don't think these early comedy bits really require incredible animation to work well per se, and I can only hope that they're saving their energy and money so that they can pull out all the stops later in the series, but it is a little bit early to be cutting corners when people are still forming first impressions in their minds. It's also possible that that one dialogue shot was an outlier that has influenced my view of the episode a little too much. This episode was a bit longer, but the pacing did feel a little fast to me, rushing through 3 chapters of the manga. I get wanting to move quickly, but some of these moments just needed a little extra time to breathe, and maybe it would have actually worked better to instead combine chapters 4 and 5, skip the omelette completely since it uses basically all the same ingredients anyway, and put the resolution to Marcille's and Chilchuck's mini arcs both at the end of the episode. This is Yoshihiro Miyajima's first time directing an entire series, so it's understandable to get off to a slightly rocky start. That said, a lot of these moments worked really well in animation, and I'll look forward to the next episode. I don't know how long I'll keep making these, probably as long as people keep watching and enjoying them, and as long as I keep having things to say. The series could end here, or it could last the entire length of the show. It all comes down to you. So if you want me to keep doing this, share this video with a friend who you think might like it, along with all the other usual YouTube stuff. The algorithm is of course great and mighty, but nothing beats good old word of mouth. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.